Hi, everybody. I thought I would give you just a little bit more context for engagement with the UCSB English Broadside Ballad Archive site. You'll see that the website is eba.english.ucsb.edu, and then there is this handy little search. You'll see there's Barnwell, Murder, 34458. Where you can just click here and type in whichever the number of the ballad is. And then you get to the Houghton Library Miscellaneous. You'll see that this is 1741, 1762. I guess they just traced it to the mid-18th century. An excellent ballad of George Barnwell. So we get to this page. If you click on ballad sheet facsimile, it's the original typeface. Sometimes it's a little bit unclear and smudgy to read. The citation has quite a lot of information sometimes. The newer the ballad is, the more likely you are to see more information just because there's more recorded details. You often don't get authors for these ballads. Once in a while you do. This one is called An Excellent Ballad of George Barnwell, who was undone by a strumpet, it happens, that caused him to rob his master and murder his uncle. This happened in the 17th century, but it became a very popular 18th century play that was written by George Lillo. Called The London Merchant. One thing that's interesting about the play itself, and one reason why we see it still being published in ballad form in the mid-18th century, is that it was a very popular play to put on Boxing Day. So Boxing Day here is like when you have a sale on December 26th, then people go to the sales after Christmas. But Boxing Day in Britain traditionally was a day for the servants to have their Christmas. So you would have a captive audience of working class people, and they would go to this play, and it was about, hey, even if you get a good job, don't hurt rich people. So it's kind of, I guess, expected that the moral of the Boxing Day play would be, be a good servant, since your audience is servants and the people making the money were not. So this is some, information about that. But if you look, you can kind of click on these little metadata categories here. And if you want to know more about crime, here we go. You've got 500, I think it tops out at 500. But yeah, look. A brief ballad touching the traitorous taking of Scarborough Castle. Whittington's College for perjury. A trick for Tyburn. Tyburn was where people were hanged. And Newgate was a famous prison in London. So when you go to the facsimile transcription and then you click on full size, you get the ballad. And so here we have, a title that previews what will happen in the ballad. That's very common. When you write an academic paper today, you're previewing what you're going to talk about. And back then they didn't care as much about spoilers. They cared about, luring people in. If you were wandering the streets selling ballads, you kind of want to know to stick around and buy one. So the story is the true story, or at least this adaptation of it, is about a young apprentice, George Barnwell. And young men it's basically child trafficking, but legal and in a different way, were put as apprentices when they were adolescents or sometimes even younger, sometimes as young as 7. And they would work in some kind of field, learn the business. Instead of going to a traditional school, they would learn a trade. And in George Barnwell's case, he was apprenticed to a merchant. And as he was kind of young and gullible, and only knew how to be, I guess, a merchant's apprentice, and he was also an adolescent with some, taste for women. He was approached by a woman whose last name was Millwood, and he met her in the street, and then he's seduced by her, and, goes, sees a sex worker, falls in love with her. Good Barnwell then, quoth she, do thou to Shoreditch come, and ask for Millwood's house, next door unto the Gun. The Gun would probably be the name of a pub. Trust me on my truth, if thou keep touch with me, for my friend's sake, and as my heart, thou shalt right welcome be. So he gets all excited. He thinks it's like a date, but he knows he needs money. He took £100 with a bag under his arm. So this is way too much money for anybody to get. But he doesn't know anything. He knocks at the door. She comes down, rustling in most brave attire, her hood and silken gown. So she's, reasonably well-to-do. She amazed my dazzling sight. She seemed so divine. So he's mistaking this person who's about to deceive him for some angelic presence. And, repeatedly the message of this story is, please don't let someone who's trying to tempt you suck you in. This is, of course, from the perspective of the guy who's been tempted by the wayward woman. If you're coming at this from Millwood's perspective, this guy is gullible, and he'll, all you have to do is wink at him the right way and you get a bunch of money. So welcome 10,000 times, well, more welcome than my brother, and better welcome, I protest, than anyone or other. You're special. So, Millwood's trying to make a buck. She doesn't get to be an apprentice and get a lot of money. I were apprentice bound to live in a house with thee. I'm so crazy about you. It's too bad I don't get to have these advantages. Don't blame a woman much her fancy to betray. Don't think it's immodest. I want to love you. And then, she's not exactly impoverished. She's got a handkerchief. It's silky and golden. So then they, hook up. Wait, where does it say? In my soul an inward thought, it wrought a sudden change, that I so wicked grew to take her by the hand. So she's upset, and it just moves him, and they hook up. I supped with her that night with joys that did abound, and for the same pay presently for the sum of twice £3. So nice little rhyme there. Anytime somebody has 100 kisses, they're probably hooking up. So, he's like, her name is Sarah in the real life and in the ballad, but in the play they just call her Millwood, which I think is interesting. Like, they take the biblical name and they just kind of remove it to make her seem more tempting. I'm not saying she's a great person, but he also gets sucked in and, steals money and kills his uncle. She doesn't actually do that with him. So there's some, stealing. He swindles £200. He doesn't know what to answer. He runs off to be with her. Let me stay with you. And then she looks at him and she's like, but you can't come here. It's like, but I gave it to you. I love you. You can't ask that. But, as she says, I have good credit and good report, and I have a reputation to protect. I can't keep you here, which is so ridiculous. I mean, she's just so much smarter than he is, and I think we're supposed to see that, it is bad. She's, not a good person. Nobody is, really, in this, except for the nice merchant. But what are we supposed to think? She's smart. He's not so smart. She takes advantage of him. We also wonder that even though she does something very wrong here, what are you going to do if you're in Millwood's spot? You can't get a normal job that will support you well. And swindling him is probably a lot less physical labor than a lot of the other things she could do. So he's trying to get her more money. He's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll just get you more money. Likewise, an uncle I have at Ludlow, he doth well. He is a grazier, who in wealth does all the rest excel. Ere I will live in lack, quoth he, and have no coin for thee, I'll rob his house and murder him. Why should you not, quoth she. Like, yeah, go for it, bro. Were I a man, ere I would want, or live in poor estate, on father's friends and all my kin, my talents I would grate. For without money, George, said she, a man is but a beast, and bringing money thou shalt be always my chiefest guest. Oh, Millwood. So he's like, okay, I'll just kill my uncle. So he, to Ludlow, he hobbles to go kill his uncle. He rode with might and main, and with welcome and good cheer he did him entertain. He stays 2 weeks. He's like waiting for a chance for 2 weeks. That's the play I want to see, is George Barnwell freaking out over how he's going to kill his uncle for this girl. I want that 2 week long meditative movie. So then, he gets a bunch of money, and then he beat his brains out of his head. These are very literary texts, obviously. They're not that. Well, you know what, though? They last, and a lot of plain language is used in works that address a wide audience. So he just grabs more money, goes to Sarah, shows her his gold, tells her about killing his uncle. She's like, don't worry, George, we have some cash. So here we go. They lived in filthy sort till all his store was gone, and means to get them any more I wish poor George had none. And so then she just, she says, I'm going to turn you in now so that we're broke, because you can't get me any more money. So when Barnwell saw her drift, to sea he got straight away. You can always run away to sea. Here fear and dread of conscience continually on him lay. Unto the mayor of London then he did a letter write, in which his own and Sarah's faults he did at large recite. So she is hanged, and he does too. And here's the end of willful youth that after harlots haunt, who in the spoil of other men about the streets do haunt. So I guess the message here is, it's okay to go and spend some money if you have it to spend, but if it's not your cash and you're just some young gullible guy, you could get into a whole lot of trouble. So, that's what we have from George Barnwell. So go through and read these other ballads and listen optionally to the podcast that I made of Anne Wallen's Lamentation. And then, of course, we have a couple more ballads. And then check in with your notes journal, and we'll check in on Slack in the next week or so. Take care.